All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Credible Opinions. Here we have this episode, Me the People, Redux. We're going to revisit our fall episode on authoritarianism and the precipice here with Professor Miguel Lacerna. How are you doing, Professor?
I'm well, and I should say, speaking of authoritarianism, that my views do not represent that of the university that I'm affiliated with, or the department, or anything. So we
It's
get
like
that up right now.
it's a little bit of a spoiler because I was going to read the disclaimer.
All right. Well, we're forced to say that everywhere we go now. So
Everywhere you go, I belong, but it's not my words. Okay, so credible opinions disclaimer. All opinions expressed on credible opinions are correct, but solely those of the individual and not made as representations or positions of any other person, entity, or institution. You're double covered. I called that political legal magic on an episode I did earlier. It's like, ooh,
that's
ooh.
great.
It will save us from any repercussions whatsoever. Uh, so Miguel, thanks for coming back.
Yep.
It's been a busy several weeks. We're now
Really? I
talking.
haven't noticed.
Yeah, it seems
What
like
do you
months.
mean?
But we're a few weeks out from the inauguration of our now president Donald Trump. And I'll jump right into it. In September 2024, you said that because Trump and his handlers would be more prepared this time, that if he were elected, it'd be the end of democracy as we know it. What is your assessment so far?
Uh, I'm not wrong so far, it sounds like. And I think that we're seeing exactly what I was worried about, which is that the sort of the erosion of institutions, of personnel, of the media, and even of sort of regular checks and balances. I think we're starting to see and happening before our eyes, and so um, this is kind of what happens in places that have autocratic rule or authoritarian regimes or fascism, whatever you want to call it. In those in places that do have that sort of undemocratic society, this is what you start to see, that erosion of the institutions, and the erosion of a sort of shared governance in favor of the sort of the governance and the rule of one person or one party or one governing body. And so I think that we're starting to see the beginnings of that. And what we'll find out is if our legal system, groups like the ACLU, who are just kind of, it seems like every day putting out some sort of new lawsuit, if the attorneys general of the different states who are also kind of pushing back legally, we'll see how much of that will actually end up transpiring. But what we're seeing is the effort to unravel that. I think we're starting to see that playing out in real time.
So, in other countries, again, these sort of coups and they sort of can happen more quickly because the political system itself is not designed like our system. Our system is actually designed to buffet against an overreaching federal government, right? That's or a king. It was originally a confederation of states. Um, what hoops do you see will need to be jumped through or knocked or jumped around or walls need to be knocked over that break that barrier between a aggressive federal government and the defense of states?
So what needs to be so what do we need to kind of do in order to keep that kind of separation of powers, or are you saying that the more um, what is being done from a top-down level to circumvent them?
Sort of, so more to the first part of
Mhm.
that, which is where are the lines if you have a completely dysfunctional federal government, right? Which is what our system is designed to protect individual states from.
Mhm.
it's hard to know because, right, it's never happened except for maybe the Civil War, right, where you actually had a complete secession, right?
Hmm.
But where does that wall that states have to defend themselves start to fall apart?
Wow, that's a really good question. I actually don't know where that wall is, and because I think a lot of it, by the like you said, kind of by the design, is that we have states have been designed to be just that, to be states, right? And so they do have some sort of autonomy and ability to kind of control their own actions to a certain extent. And I think what you're seeing is kind of a state by state kind of variation in terms of how these things are being approached. So, in a place like North Carolina, where we live, where we do have a governor and attorney general from the other party, we see that there's not going to be as much cooperation there at the sort of state level, but yet we do have the sort of the state legislature, which is controlled by the ruling party. And so we're going to see a lot of efforts, for example, we'll probably talk about it later, but like examples of basically the state legislature trying to take action at the state level to support and really be in lockstep with the things that are coming down from these executive orders, for example, from the White House. So I think, but in a state like California, we're seeing that there's a lot more resistance to that at the state level. So I do think that like you said, the design is probably is designed to mitigate a little bit against that sort of just like total authoritarian rule without the states actually having some sort of incubation against that. But I think that, or inoculation, I should say. But I think that we're starting to see that tested right now, state by state. And so I'm not sure how much these kind of typical states' rights types of things will actually rule out over the things that are coming down from the White House. It's really hard to tell, but yeah, I think we're finding out really as every day.
So you kind of mentioned the state by state and the sort of mixed bag of resistance, we'll call it. Oh,
Resistance or compliance, yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is your assessment of the response by the Democratic Party?
What response? So the thing is that like I feel like people have been talking about this happening. People on the left and the right have been talking about this. I mean, Project 2025 was really the playbook for how to actually rule in this way. And now we're starting to see many of the steps, the actions are being taken are kind of in alignment with that playbook. So it's not like this came as a surprise to anybody. I mean, really, people on the right and people on the left thought that this would happen in the second Trump presidency, and now we're starting to see that being tested. And so I think that it's one of those situations where it's surprising to me that the Democratic Party, which has seen this coming, which did say, "Oh, perhaps even in a hyperbolic way, oh, Trump being elected or whatever, Republican state control will be the end of the world," and and then it happened, and there's no like real cohesive message or response to that. It's kind of surprising to a lot of us, just observing it. You knew this was going to happen. You warned it was going to happen. President Biden said that this was something that he was trying to prevent from happening, and then it happens, and then people are kind of just like, well, what are we supposed to do? I think that so anybody looking for leadership in the Democratic Party is probably going to be disappointed. I mean, they probably would have been disappointed before now, but I definitely think that what I've noticed about it is there hasn't really been a kind of unified message or even opposition at this point. And all these confirmations are going through pretty much without a lot of opposition. And, we're seeing people take to social media to kind of complain about it or going to the media to try to complain about it. But really, it's actually the legal system that is putting up the biggest resistance. It is attorneys and attorneys general who are and judges, even Trump appointed judges who are actually saying, hey, this is a bridge too far. And that's what I'm seeing as the biggest resistance, not necessarily from a party politics perspective.
So that it kind of begs the question, and this is sort of a question of conversations I've had is, do you think they had a plan? So they had November, December, and most of January to create a plan. Have you seen any indications that there was actually a plan?
I've seen concepts of a plan. Uh,
A concept, that's only 14% of a plan.
I've not seen plans. I mean, if they have one, they're holding it close to the vest, that's for sure. Because I have not seen anything that looks like a cohesive plan, and everything that I've seen so far has been incredibly reactive. And I think that it's like, oh, he's doing this, so let's talk. We talked about before the show, like, oh, he's doing this. It's going to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, and then we'll talk about how terrible and whatever that is. But that's just reacting to the kind of the newest thing that's dangled out in front of people, where we have real people whose funding is being cut off. I mean, it's already happening. Funding is being suspended, not just around the world, but throughout the country through research institutions, for example. We're seeing people who are losing sanctuary of churches from ICE agents, for example, and from schools, the right to, like in the state of North Carolina, the right to an education, which people have, who would not be able to do that with law enforcement, immigration enforcement being put into schools. So we're seeing real rights being infringed on right now, and real sort of real funds being taken away and affecting people's lives. And I don't see a message around that at all from the Democratic Party.
So it actually touches right on one of the topics I wanted to go into. One is the deportation issue, and there's all the talk of setting up Guantanamo and schools and churches, local law enforcement participation. There are raids happening in different states, mostly blue states, but some in some red states. Do you see this as I'm going to bias it a little bit. Do you see this as a cruel political spectacle or a substantive policy and ideology advancement?
Yes.
Or yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that it can achieve both of those things. I think one of the things is that it plays well in terms of the Trump's kind of message of promises made, promises kept type of a thing. He did say he would do this. He is now coming up with a plan to do this. And he's really striking fear into the heart of a lot of people who came to this country. Some of them, I want to point out, legally, and who have been here legally, and who have been documented, like Venezuelan people who have been here because they had temporary protected status, which is an actual designation that is given to people from countries where they believe that they have a real compelling reason for their own safety to come here. And that temporary protected status was just lifted by the Secretary of Homeland Security, Nome. And it's just, these people now are being put in a status where they now are no longer allowed to be here. And so they're being classified by the administration as criminals, but they were here in a legal, documented way. And so, but now from one day to the next, they're deemed illegal and criminals and undocumented. And so I think that is really striking fear into the hearts of people who have come here through different means and are staying in this country either temporarily or hoping to stay here permanently. And so that is playing well, saying, yeah, we're getting them. I'm seeing lots of headlines from some right-wing media outlets really, really making a case of, oh, this violent criminal was caught and deported, or this bloodthirsty criminal. I saw that a story that said the bloodthirsty criminal gang member from I think it might have been from Venezuela was arrested and is now going to be deported. And so it plays well the idea that we're catching these bad guys who are doing these terrible things, and at the same time, you know, it's actually really it's an actual policy of mass deportation that is being rolled out.
So you talked about really like the shifting sands of taking someone from a legal status and then the stroke of a pen to an illegal status. Let's take that next step. There's also this sort of discussion about birthright citizenship, right? And this, the words to take this away. Um, where are we when we reach a place where someone's actual citizenship can be taken away? Now, I put that in the context of we sound like it's ridiculous, like, but the fact is, most of us who are here sort of have birthright citizenship, right? Because we were just born here. We don't have papers. But then you go back to Obama and you go back to the birther movement, right? Where they challenged his citizenship when he had all the documentation necessary to establish it. So, what world do we get into where let's jump into a world where we no longer have this birthright citizenship? How's anyone supposed to establish their citizenship?
Well, I think that one, I hope we don't get into that world. So, I hope that the courts actually uphold the Constitution of the United States, that where if you are born in this country, you have citizenship. That's always been the case. It's been interpreted that way. It's been challenged in the past,
Mm.
um, around the era of the Chinese Exclusion Act, and it's been upheld. And so it is not something. I mean, it's settled law, and it is something that should be seen by any basically court in the nation. But the fact that something that's so settled and so such a constitutional right that could be with, again, like you said, with the stroke of a pen, declared to be not the case, and that we have to wait for this circuit, go all the way up to the different courts to actually rule whether or not that could happen, potentially all the way up to the Supreme Court, although we're not there yet. Is part of kind of that erosion of democracy that we talked about last fall, that we're starting to see. That's real. That's not something that's like, oh, just a bunch of platitudes. That's something that we're taking away citizenship from people as just because their parents were not citizens of this country when they were born on U.S. soil. That should be something that's a concern for every constitutional lawyer and really every citizen of this country. So I think that is a real, obviously, so that should be something that is a real concern. But what, to your question though, is where is that coming from, and what's the point of that? And you are suggesting that, if I can interpret your question, that like there's something. What does Barack Obama and people, with Venezuelan parents or Mexican parents have in common? And it sounds like that was kind of where you're going with the question. But like, yeah, that who gets to be an American?
Mhm.
And that's really at the heart of this. Who gets to be an American?
And I
So
go, bring it up.
Elon Musk is fine, South
Yeah,
Africa.
yeah, but I bring it up because you have people challenge citizenship, but this also
Yeah.
falls into the line of challenging people's eligibility to vote, right? So
Yes.
you have these movements, even we have in Supreme Court, North Carolina right now. You're challenging someone's right to vote, right? Based on documentation that you say isn't consistent with whatever. What happens when you get to a point where you have a government that has become comfortable with revoking the citizenship of people? Like, how would I prove that I'm an American citizen? I got a passport. Well, I don't know. We need to go back. What document? Like, there's that's the part that is the shifting sands of that again. Who gets to be a citizen? Who gets to be American? And up until like recently, it's pretty clear. If you're born here, you're an American. Now, do you fit the mold of American, or do you speak the right language, or do you have the right culture? Are you the right skin color? Well, you maybe none of those things is true, but you are an American, right? So that's a big concern for me because a lot of these things aren't platitudes, right? They're not. We've learned this. If you haven't learned the lesson that when they say I'm going to shoot you between the eyes, And you're like, well, you're not really going to shoot. No, they're going to shoot you between the eyes, right?
Mhm.
Like, don't, they're not bluffing, right? They
Yeah.
might miss. They might miss a few times.
Mhm.
Shoot, right? Um, so that kind of, there's no answer to that right now. Um, but I really wanted to get your feel for that sort of citizenship issue. And I guess it goes to a question to go around your area of expertise. Have you seen in Latin America these sort of citizenship slash other conflicts, or this injection of turning people into others and revoking citizenship, or is that how does that play out in other places in the Americas?
Yeah, I mean, this it has happened. It is unfortunately just a thing that does happen and elsewhere. So to think that this country it can't happen here is I think to assume that the United States is somehow different than anybody else, but we're not. I mean, we only obey the Constitution and our laws to the extent that we allow our leaders to do so. But if we allow them to break them, then we're no different than any other country who has also thrown out their constitutions, has also declared people to be, persona non grata. In Peru, for instance, and my wife Jillian wrote a paper about this recently, but that they also during World War II tried to revoke citizenship for Japanese Peruvians as part of the effort from the United States um, to to basically do encampments for Japanese people, and they tried to use that opportunity to expel people from their country and revoke their citizenship. So it has happened before, but it's also been the case where in Latin America, people have there's a history of people demanding their right to be treated as citizens. There's a
Hmm.
long history of people from minoritized groups, for example, or women, for example, and that's happened here too. But saying no, we have a right to citizenship and all the things that citizenship affords people in this society, and that there's been this constant move, really from the time of independence in the early 1800s, even through today, of Latin American people saying no, we demand citizenship on the same type of citizenship that is enshrined in our constitution or that is guaranteed to other members of our society, and they've really pushed for that and really tried to ensure that narrow definitions of citizenship are actually expanded and includes a kind of grassroots vision of what the nation should be.
I'm gonna connect a bunch of dots and go into a hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe what they're trying to get to is a point where you don't have a citizenship that is established by the federal government, but states will create citizenship criteria. So if you're the citizen of a state, you're a citizen of the United States of America, but then you push the responsibility onto the states to make the decision who's a citizen and who isn't. And then I'm connecting the dots with these real IDs and these things we're starting to require, right?
Mm-hmm.
For documentation. And it's like, if you don't meet the citizenship criteria for Texas, well, maybe you need to move to Pennsylvania or Virginia, where you can be a citizen of Virginia. I don't know. I'm going kind of left out in left field quite a bit, but I'm trying to think of sort of, there's this constant push of giving responsibilities to states, right? There's this that's what they're trying to do. Even when they talk about eliminating FEMA, they're saying, "Oh, I don't need FEMA. Give the money to the states. They'll figure it out. We don't need this. We don't need a Department of Education. Let the states handle it." Right. So when you start to connect the dots on these citizenship issues and questions, it's like, what's the end game, right? The end game would be, if you can't prevent someone from being a citizen, can you call it into question long enough to win some elections, right? Can you keep certain amounts of people from voting because they can't prove their citizenship? And again, to connect another dot, I read an article where uh, the General Assembly was going to look at the largest school districts in North Carolina, Charlotte Mecklenburg schools and Wake County schools, and they're so big. Maybe there's a problem here. I sent a text about it, and I said the only reason they want to do this is to create more school districts that they can potentially win school board seats on.
Mm.
Right? So Wake County, you're not going to win. But if you split Wake County up just the right way, you could end up with a Republican majority school district in one of the most populous counties in the state. So there's always an end game to all these incremental steps they're putting in that, again, they look insignificant, but you've got to see their end game is always this power play, right?
Yeah.
Power.
I think that would be dangerous because like then you would there are some states that still have not formally I believe this is true, not a US historian, so I should say that, but my understanding is that there are still states that have not formally ended slavery. And so we're talking about, if we put the power to the states like that, that would come up against constitutional guarantees pretty quickly. As states start to interpret their own kind of views of citizenship, they might start reinstituting a poll tax, or they might say, we're going to have, it to where you have to have been in this country for this many years, and the problem is those will then really go up against what some of our national guarantees are from the federal system. So I think that would be, I think, pretty devastating. And maybe that is the design to create that kind of like just kind of mayhem across states. But I think that it's really that would be a really slippery slope of just kind of basically deferring everything to the states to kind of determine what their own citizenship is. I think the real one, I think what you said is probably absolutely true, that like there's always a power play, right? There's always a
That's
power play.
politics, right?
Yeah, and that the Republican Party is really good at just grabbing power wherever they can. I mean, the fact that the state of North Carolina was a Democratic controlled assembly for what, over 100 years, and then all of a sudden, the first time that the Republicans actually do eke out a majority, they redistrict it to where they'll stay in power for another 100 years. I mean, the Democrats it would never occur to them to do that when they were in power, to even enshrine it that way.
I'm pretty sure they probably did that too.
When did they do it?
I don't know, but I'm sure the history is sort of. I bet if I did, again, not American historian,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the shenanigans put on by the Democratic Party in North Carolina, again, remembering what the Democrats were.
Well,
right?
sure, but in terms of
Right.
the sort of contemporary Democratic Party, I can never see that happening.
They're not, they're
Yeah,
not,
you're right. In terms of
they're not strategic enough now.
yeah, if you're talking about yeah, the sort of the old sort of historical Democratic Party, sure, but most definitely. But in terms of like kind of the modern Democratic Party, I just don't think it's something that really has ever occurred to them. And so, but the other goal, I think, of doing these things is just to really define whose country this is, who this country belongs to, and who belongs in this country. And I think that's pretty clear that the message that's being sent is that that this country is for white America and white immigrants. And that if you're not one of those things, then your citizenship is suspect, something that could be questioned, whether your parents are from Latin America, or whether you're Barack Obama, president of the United States, and you have an African parent. And so I think that there is a kind of defining of who gets to be an American. And that's really kind of, I think, one of the end games for this too, is defining who this country belongs to and who does not belong in this country.